Thanks. People at the back, can you hear me okay? Can you understand me? Is the mic cutting out? No. There was a thing yesterday, sometimes there was a mic cutting out. Maybe I'm imagining it. Um, Thanks for coming to this session. I'm really excited and just buzzing, really, to tell you about the stuff that I've been figuring out. Talks on Dagger. Just a couple of... The style of this talk is going to be interactive, right? I know a bunch of stuff about Dagger because I've been like in it and learning it with the Dagger team, but I don't know what you want to know about stuff in general. So Slack is there. I've got a phone in my back pocket. So please do ask questions because I'm just guessing, right? As a speaker, I'm guessing what you might want to know, but tell me, and then we can probably pop it open together and take a look. I got a couple of, I usually don't do demos. It's usually all slides and there's code samples and stuff. It doesn't make much sense in this case. So I've got a couple of slides I've made, and then I've got like demos, and then maybe go back to slides. I don't really know because I usually do just slides only. So we'll figure that out. I'm figuring it out. It's the first time I'm doing this, so bear with me. All the switching back and forward. Okay, questions then. Prior to this talk, who's heard of Dagger or looked it up out of curiosity? Okay, not many. Okay, fair enough. It's got nothing to do with swords and knives, right? To start. The guy that created Docker, he created Dagger. This is a new idea, right? And why is it called Dagger, right? Anyway, quick intro. Who's heard me speak before or attended a talk? Okay, maybe 10% people. This is what I do or did as a career, I suppose. And for the past 10 years, I've been like a subject matter expert on CI/CD stuff, doing consulting, going around the world, fixing projects, things like that. And I do open source things. And there's Linux Foundation, CD Foundation stuff, and I organize conferences, and I do this stuff, and that's me. And people say PHP's dying and dead. Obviously, they're delusional. They're just, getting into the Twitter wars and all that, right? But obviously, as you know, PHP's alive and well, and it's into everything. You will walk out in the street, everything. It's in everything, right? And so keep that going. I usually put this on every slide, every talk I do, right? Because it's so important to remember for yourself. And this is how you should feel if you're pushing yourself hard enough. That's the message of this. Right? That was me today. That was me yesterday. Like I said, I've been doing CI/CD stuff really deep for a long time, and I thought, I mostly, I don't know everything, but most of the time I may have figured it out. And then I was on social media and I seen something about Dagger. I was like, what's that? I clicked it, and I was like, oh my god! I had that moment. I didn't even get that moment. I was curious, and I went, oh, this is pretty cool. And then once I actually started digging into it, it just kept blowing my mind more and more and more. And I'm like, oh my god, I have to tell people about this. I have to actually, spread the message. So that's what I did as a career. This is where I'm at now. I don't work as a consultant anymore. I have my own business. We sponsor this conference and stuff. I got really tired of sort of had the traditional definition of recruitment, right, and how we do it. We're all hired as developers to build cool projects, but a substantial amount of our time and your time, we're spending that in recruitment, hiring efforts, right? And for me, going from company to company, I thought the tech is okay, it's good, we can be improved, but the model for hiring was, for me, fundamentally broken. And I get so tired of it, I built a tech company to solve the problem for all the other companies, all you guys and girls. Effectively, we meet with you, your team, understand exactly what you're looking for, and then we'll use our deep network and do the screening and analysis and interviewing. We'll take about 50, 60, maybe 100 people. We'll bring that right down to, say, the top 10, and then we'll interview the top 10, and then we'll pick we'll rank them, and we'll basically give you, like, as the customer in this case, or your team, you'll get like 2 CVs. But it's not just any random CVs, it's the ones that you want, because we are you, right? You have to keep that link, that chain linked up. If an internal recruiter person is involved in finding people, screening people, bringing those people to your attention, there's a huge gap that's missing, right? So we basically fill that gap 90%, and all you have to do really is just interview 2 or 3 people. The conversation changes from, normally when you get a CV or you interview somebody, normally it starts as, are these people good enough? Now the conversation is, which one do we like the most? Because they're already perfect, because we know what perfect is, because you told us and we sat down together. So anyway, that's what I like to rant about, because I'm obsessed with it currently. But please, if you're interested or your company is looking to hire people, give us a shout, obviously, for conversation. I don't want to talk about it too much, but I wanted to tell you this is my new brainchild, disrupting recruitment and flipping it on its head and saying, if we were going to do it right, like say 20 years ago, whatever, how should you design taking software engineering processes and applying them into resourcing and hiring models, right? And it goes deep. So anyway, that's what I'm obsessed with. And then you get effectively you get to build cool projects, and you don't have to worry about most of the work because we'll do it. Right? Anyway, this is the script. Q&A. I'm hoping to have as much time for Q&A as possible. So please also help me with questions and curiosities, because I'd love to know what you're interested about. Okay, let's go. We're not going straight into the talk. This is in the dream. They tell you this is what they did, a pipeline, right? We call them pipelines, but really they're not pipelines anymore, because microservices and tech gets more complicated and convoluted, and so actually this is the reality of CI systems, right? You can replace the words with anything, right? But the word pipelines is not a suitable word anymore. It's workflows. That's why new companies like GitHub Actions, you'll have a workflows file, right? It's a workflow file, because we now understand that we can't just, there's no like monolith and like super simple basic things we had a long time ago. That's not the reality anymore. The reality is there's so many different pieces, and you need to do this and generate your assets file, like JavaScript files, and do that, and then you got to do this, and you know what I mean? And maybe there's multiple services in play, right? Maybe you have like 4 or 5, 6, maybe 20 services in your project. Maybe it's the main one, right? Not isolation, but like the whole thing. If you're about to do a big release, you've got to get everything working, get it on the cloud, and run your tests and do all your simulations, and maybe put that. And so that's effectively the reality. And tools aren't really built well. So we'll dig into that. I started talking to you about Dagger. Dagger's not to do with knives, right? A dag is this word, which I'm not going to try to pronounce. But this is a dag. It's happening all the time. It's used a lot in data engineering world, like all the time, because they've got different bits of data and it's got to flow in and out. So like DAG's like a basic thing, but I hadn't even, to be honest, even heard of that before. Who here has heard of a DAG before? Okay, so it's just me. There's maybe like 30% of the room who know that. But effectively what it just means is it's just coordination or timing of sequences. And when it comes to like tech, sometimes you want to call something once, but then you call it again later, contextually, so it's slightly different, right? Reusing, coming in and out. And so that's effectively what a DAG is, right? Can you go on? This is Dagger, just pulled it off the, can you read that at the back? Maybe, right? Don't worry about it, it's not that important, it's just, this is a screenshot from the Dagger website, right? But effectively Dagger is now your CI/CD code runs everywhere and anywhere the same. If you remember, there's 2 types of change, right? There's transitional change and transformative change, right? And cool things come and they go, and it was helpful. If you remember, before Docker existed, right, as a solution to underlying thing, we were all using like Vagrant, right? And we were doing Vagrant up, and we were building something on only our machine, and then someone else had to do the same. And you couldn't take, it works on my machine, right? And Docker, the introduction of Docker and I guess containers and images was a transformative shift in our industry. And we all felt that. So now like somebody just build a Docker image once, and then everybody just runs the same thing. You want to make a change the file, push it to the repo, bam, all works, right? It's magic. And it runs not on your local machine, it also runs the same on any other machine. So so production is local, effectively, right, when you're using Docker. Now, that hasn't been the case until now with any of your CI systems, right? So examples are, you've got Jenkins, so that's not on your machine, you're running things up in Jenkins land, or in GitHub or whatever it is. It's a completely different environment. And if you take that idea, the concept of with Docker, and you apply that to CI/CD, testing, pipelines, deployment, take the same idea that you could build something and your machine is the CI machine. It doesn't have to be, but it could be, right? It could be the CD pipeline that goes to production. We no longer, we push code, and then you have to wait for the CI to kick in, and then you watch your builds run. See that feedback cycle, that long, feedback cycle, doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't need to exist anymore. But Dagger, obviously, by the end of this talk, hopefully you'll get it, right? Let's keep going. So this is an example. This is a Docker file, right? The detail isn't important. It's just an example of what. So who here is familiar with what a Docker file looks like? You've opened it up. Everybody, almost good, right? This is our life currently, right? Or today has to be. If you want stuff. So let's take a little look at like line 3, line 1, right? We start with my operating system, a thingy, right? And then number 3, you're doing apt-gets and installing packages, cool, right? But then this is common use sed because it's string replace. There's like it's like a env file, right? Or it's got placeholders to stuff because you don't know what you're going to need, and then the real value will be in the file, and then it's getting baked up, right? Environment variable stuff, because this is not a shell, but when you do a Docker build, it will then become a shell later in the future. So there's also a gap. You're not where you want to be. You're in Docker, which then runs bash, which then runs maybe PHP, or maybe something else, and then that thing ends up running your PHP code. So you've got like 4 layers before you hit a line of PHP. But now Dagger means there is no layers, and it's just PHP. You don't need to do bash. Yeah, you need bash commands to do stuff, but for the majority of 90%, you don't need to get out of the context of what you're already familiar with, because you all know PHP very well. So now everything that you have to do in life, you can do it in PHP. And you can reuse packages and libraries and stuff. Like if, for example, how do you read a YAML file into an array, tweak some stuff, maybe, and then save that YAML file back out, right? Well, if you're using PHP, you could just read it, change some array values, and then, write the file back out with the YAML, like the Symfony YAML component, right? For example, it'd just be like 3 lines of code, easy. But the context in which all this happens, it's like bash, right? So you've got to try and figure out where the weird like this is said, this is str replace, right? So you ask yourself, like, why are we doing this? Obviously, we're doing it because this is how it came to be. We solved some problems by innovating, by the Docker and containers, but it also created problems, or like, not problems, but if you look back, you're thinking, right, anyway, I'll keep going. This is another example, it's a PHP one, if you're lucky, if this is what your Docker file looks like, right? But you copy the files inside of it, and then so the last example of a Docker file was just sed, right? It's very basic, and now we do more stuff. You're going to install PHP extensions, right? You want PDO and graphics libraries and stuff. So you've got to do this, right? And that's ugly, that's nasty, and it's not even a shell, it's a Docker file. Like you can't just run that and see what happens, because Docker will run this, you can't run it. So it grows, right? And it gets worse and worse and worse over time. We keep going. You see, familiar, right? Keeps going. It's the way, but it doesn't make sense. As I said, this is one of my files, right? This is what I'm doing. And you've got to do this before you deploy to production, right? I suppose. You're in a pipeline, and a lot of people are doing it inside the YAML files, which is even worse. I'm going to show you stuff. Docker file. So this is my Docker file for one of my projects. This is a real Docker file. So this is our life, right? It's nasty. I'm showing you this because you'll be able to see the comparison separately. Okay. Now, you have an image, right, in your project. You've got a Docker file, so this is Docker Compose. Who's familiar with Docker Compose? Yeah, cool. Dagger makes this redundant. It doesn't, how do I say this? It just doesn't make sense anymore. You're like, why would I write YAML all my life when I can write some PHP, right? So, but Docker Compose is extremely useful and valuable, and we want it because we need services, we need multiple things. We need a database and a cache and an app, or maybe a couple of apps, right? Microservices and stuff, and it keeps going. So, and you've also got dependencies. So like this guy depends on that guy. Also, on GitHub Actions, when you're writing hundreds of lines of YAML, you need dependencies, right? Like the order, because it's just a YAML file, right? You need to put like the order, so therefore the machine understands, oh, okay, I've got to run this block, but I can't run that block because I need the database first, so it's going to run the other block, right? And our life is, who wants to do that, right? That doesn't make any sense. It's a tool, it's useful, but, maybe there was a better way, and obviously this is that. So there's an example of a database, right? Again, you're writing this thing, and then, as part of Docker and as part of Docker Compose, you've got things like command, entry point, and health check, right? Which is like starting to go more commandy, like shell commands, right? Like how do you do the health check? What's the entry point? Do you want a custom command? And you're starting to write shell stuff in YAML, right? That's not a good idea. So let me show you now. Yeah, I don't need to show you the GitHub Actions file, to be honest. You get the point. Okay, Dagger Cloud. Now, oh, my slides are on that browser. Cool, right. So here is the Symfony Frameworks GitHub Actions file. Right? Who has projects that look like this? Yeah, okay. So we can delete all this. Don't need it anymore. This is why I'm not sure. I don't do the demos, so I'm still learning the switchy stuff. Okay, this is Dagger Cloud. So the detail isn't important yet, but I'm showing you that Dagger Cloud is this, and it's free for you. And you just put the key on your machine, like export Dagger Cloud token equals, and then paste. And every time on the command line that you run Dagger, it gives you cool stuff as well. So I'm only checking this out a couple of days ago for the first time. This is me on my local machine just building the talk. And so this is a DAG, right? On the left, you see there's like arrows and stuff. I've got a super, super basic pipeline that really doesn't do much at all. But in a real pipeline, you would have the flows and dependencies and stuff, and it would visualize it really well. So check out Dagger Cloud as well. This is an example of someone else's pipeline that he sent me. I don't know if it's going to see okay. Again, the text isn't important, but there's lines. You see how they're coming in and out, and sometimes they might come in and out twice. Like there's Docker pull, right, or a thing. And so, does it come out okay? Yeah. Anyway, so this is a visualization of a workflow, not a pipeline, and this is the definition of the tool is to manage all this. So it just is magic. And yeah, timings. Okay. How does it do the magic? I was showing you the example of like a Docker file, right, and a Docker Compose file, and that's kind of cool. But Docker in itself isn't eventually matured where the underlying engine was not the Docker engine anymore. It was called build kit engine, right? And that was where like how you do layers and like because each line in a Docker file is a layer, right? And if the top guy changes, then it'll invalidate all the rest and it has to do it all the time. But it's got a cacher. There's other companies that will let you use containers and apps. It's not Docker because it's the same engine, right? It's like a core engine that does that. There's OpenShift and there's others that they'll do it. They'll have their own Docker file. It's maybe an OpenShift file or something, right? So the point is there's an underlying engine that because not every company wanted to use Docker files or use containerization in the way that Docker, the company, the team decided to put things together. They maybe have their own complicated, more customized things they want to do with images and layers. So basically, the drive was to change, not doing everything up here, just in one Docker, but the engine itself. So it's like a framework agnostic type thing. And all these other companies are just using the engine for their own evil deeds. And that is exactly what Dagger is doing. It's taking, so my point is, The innovation journey that we happened in time was good because it created this core engine that you can then make future innovations off of, and that's kind of what's happened here. Ironically, the guy that built Docker is doing this, but anybody could do it. Okay. Because, okay, at the moment you've got pipelines, and you run a pipeline, and it does stuff, checks out code, does tasks, and then there'll come a part where it says Docker build, right? And it builds the image, puts your code in it, and does stuff. And if you're lucky on CI, the build may be cached, because there's on a previous run of the pipeline. But you still have to go through all that, and then maybe you get the only part to use the Docker engine is the Docker build part. And then everything else, is not that, and it's just doing its own stuff. So Dagger basically flips it, because the entire pipeline or workflow is running as a container and a Docker engine underneath. So the whole pipeline is cached. So a Docker file and a Docker image, each line is a layer, right? And you'll get a cache on that layer. Think of the same idea, but for the entire pipeline. So a step, like check out the code, run the tests, change permissions, do things in your pipelines. Each one of those tasks is a layer, and it's all cached. So if you've got a 25-minute pipeline, maybe the middle part of that, maybe it's like 3 minutes for a Docker build, right? So the whole thing is cached. So that 25 minutes might become 1 minute. I suppose. I mean, I haven't tested it personally, but other people are doing it already. And that's been blowing my mind. And it took me a few times just to go over this. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I realized another thing, and I learned another thing, and I'm hoping so far at least. I know I've not shown you code yet, but this is an example of one thing that is a fundamental thing that will make an immediate impact to our lives. In addition to not having to write Docker files and YAML and all that, but this in itself, this is money, this is time, and businesses are going to love you for putting it into the team. Because you can't release software or get feedback until your pipeline goes green. So the speed time to get that feedback to say, yes, it's green, or to find a bug that in your test failing, this is going to give you a big boost. So, yep. If you remember earlier, a Docker image runs the same on every machine, right? And that's great. We love that, right? But obviously you can't say the same for CI. But now this is the whole case, because now an image and a container is the first-class citizen. It's in charge. So effectively, what happens in a remote machine is the exact same. It's going to happen on your machine. So your local machine is CI, or can be CI. CD. Obviously, that's not ideal, but when you're building your CI pipeline or debugging it, you're just debugging your own machine now. And the feedback cycle, because at the moment, we push to the internet, and then it goes up, and then it runs, and then we realize, oh, we've made a problem, or syntax error, something silly, or there's a bug in your whole project somewhere, right? So you've got that lag time doesn't exist anymore, because you just do Dagger run, and then the pipeline file, and it just runs. Change some code, hit save, up, enter, bam, run the pipeline, bam, run the pipeline, over and over and over. So that also doesn't exist anymore, doesn't need to exist. That's a significant lag time, right? And it's not your machine. So how are you going to get onto the CI box? If you're using something like GitHub Actions, or they give you their own machine, ephemeral, temporary machines, right? So how are you going to SSH onto that machine and debug it, right? You can do these things, but they're difficult and not always possible, because you have to pay more money to these package tiers to let you get access to a machine that, by default, it's like shared resource under the hood, so you can't get into it. But obviously you can get into your own machine because you're sitting in front of it, right? So for me, that was a eureka moment. I'm like, oh my God, because I was doing a lot of CI. Debugging on CI, CD stuff, that's the most challenging part, I think, right? Time consuming, the thing, I just lost 4 hours of my life because there's a config setting somewhere, and you can't figure that out because it's on another machine, plus all the lag time I've been talking about. So that's going to be fundamental to you're able to build things and debug. So your time now, you can use it in doing other things like building cool stuff, right? How do you install Dagger? One line. And if you're on a Mac, it's one line. That's it. No magic. I think you might need to have Docker installed on your machine, But that's trivial because, it's a common thing. We do it all the time. So, but it might install Docker itself, right? It relies on Docker, right? So I already had Docker installed on my machine, so I don't know if it brought it with you, but you can, of course, try it and let me know. One line. I was like, oh my God, is that it? I was like reading the docs over and over. I'm like, surely there's more steps to this. And ultimately, there wasn't. I was like, oh my God. There is so Dagger has, let's say in a Docker file, you've got copy, right? Or add, right? And copy code, and that's an example of thing. There's a run command. There's a user thing, to switch to user that's in the Docker file. There's all these commands, right? Effectively, and more. There's SDKs for all of that functionality, but it's code, right? First-class citizens. So there's Node.js, all the languages, right? Golang, JavaScript, TypeScript, etc., etc. And up until recently, so when I discovered this project around November time, there wasn't a PHP SDK. And that's when I reached out to Solomon, who's the guy that created Docker, and I said, this is outstanding, and you don't have an SDK for the PHP world. Can I help with that? And so I've been spending a lot of time with him, with Solomon and the rest of the Dagger team, working towards this point now, where we do have an SDK, and we're ready to rock. The way it works is it's code generation. They use a GraphQL. So the Dagger engine is basically a GraphQL thing wrapped around it, and that's the definition, right? It's like an API spec, effectively, and you can generate code from that. So what's happening now is basically they change the spec. You can add a new shiny thing, and they just hit run, and it would generate the SDKs from the GraphQL spec for all the languages, right? I mean, now it's available on Composer, and all you have to do is type that, and you've got it. Put it in your projects, right? No bash. Okay, done that. I won't talk about that. I'm going to pause. That's maybe a thing at the end the first time. Let me show you stuff. Okay, how do I zoom in on this? Okay. If I want a PHP runtime, right? At the moment, you have to go have a Docker file and do all this stuff, and then do Docker build, and then do Docker up, and then you can get into a shell and you can do stuff, and that all disappears now, and you just do from. So it should look familiar, right? Because you've seen it in your Docker file. So it's the same stuff, just it's just accessed in a different, way. And if I run this, I want to show you the output. What file is that? 1. Okay. So you can type Dagger run, and then the runtime, which is JavaScript or Python or now PHP. So the good thing is, if you've got DevOps people in your companies and we don't like that, we like Python, cool, great, good for you, because it will run the same and on everyone's machine. You don't need to install Golang or whatever to run their stuff because it's containerized, right? Also, there was some code samples when I was playing around with this, December time, because the PHP wasn't, initiated by the Dagger team, because they themselves are not PHP devs, they are infrastructure guys, so they're doing like Golang and other stuff, so Python, so that's why it came first. I used ChatGPT to take their pipeline files, their Dagger JavaScript pipeline files, and I just said, ChatGPT, write this for me in PHP, because it's so super basic that a bot can. So you could write it in PHP and maybe convert it to JavaScript or Python, and then go, there you go, or vice versa, right? So that we've got now a shared space between devs, DevOps, everybody in the team. There's like a shared common ground now, and kind of regardless of the language, it's all going to look the same. The point I was making about it's an API spec that generates these SDKs. They're syntactically identical, right? They all have like container, from, with exec, and all the other functions that I'll show you. It's identical. So even if you don't know Golang or Python and someone else has written a Dagger file, you can read it because it's identical, right? And that's also really cool thing to mention. And you just have to tell it which file, because you might have like one for doing stress and load testing. Who here has multiple pipelines in their company, not just one, like for different purposes. Okay, yeah, most people, so that all disappears and it's just a different PHP file, right? Here it is, so like 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are just different pipelines to do stuff, right? And that's what it would be for you. So Dagger run, and this one, watch this. Bam. Obviously, I've downloaded the image from the internet, and it's PHP 8.3, by the way, brand new. And but this is what it'll be like in your life. If you're running your pipelines, either you go to your GitHub actions and the YAML file, and you just type Dagger run, my pipeline.php, and effectively that's it, you're out of there. You're not in YAML land anymore. You just need, I guess, suppose, GitHub actions to give you that push trigger, and then you're out of there, back into PHP. So it says cached. So what's my point? The whole pipelines are cached. So on CI, that's right. It's a Docker layer. So the output says. I don't know, why does it not say anything? Oh, because I've done php-v. Anyway, point is, you can run a command, right? Let's move on to another demo, another thing. Now, keep going, right? In Docker, you don't have to say download and compile everything in one Docker file. There's a thing called copy from, and what you can do is you can take code or files or something from another image and bring it from another Docker image, not from the hard drive, and bring it into yours. So like to download, compile, and do stuff, it's already done with another Docker image, and you just do a from, and you switch it across. That's the smart way to do it, rather than waiting to build it yourself. So there's another image has already built it for you. So here's an example of, basically, there's a file. That's simple, right? We can read that. And then, and there's an addition here, so it says with file, right? One line. And that's what that does. So that Docker file thing, example, now it's just one line of PHP, with user, you see. So in a Docker file, we've got the user command to switch the user to be the right, so when it runs, it's not going to run as root, and everything's going to get messed up. So, one line. Let's see, this is where it gets more interesting, right? Like real world examples. So if you remember, I was showing you the YAML file, right? Example where here's a database, here's MySQL, right? And you're going to do this YAML, and I'm saying Dagger makes that redundant. This is it. It's, you can change it up, do what you want, but fundamentally it's now a variable in your code, rather than something else over here that's some YAML thing that you have to use Docker Compose, which is a whole separate thing in itself to bring it up. So if I want a database, I just put that in, and then it's a service, because it's what, the Docker Compose has, they're all services, right? They can communicate and all that, they've got a name. So that's instead. And then, how do you attach that to your app, so your app can talk to the database? It's one line, with service binding. And then that's the name of the service. I've called it DB. So if you're familiar with Docker Compose, the name of the key of each of the thing is the host name. If the key is database, then it'll be like TCP database, yada yada, right? So that's it. Now you've got a database. So you think about it, you can create so many cool things now. And you can make them maybe as a shared space for all the devs and all the people in the company. You no longer need to be a DevOps specialist to do really effective stuff, because obviously it's first class. It's right in front of you. And that is Netcat, NC's Netcat, just like a telnet, just a ping. Can I talk to you on port 3306? And if I run that, it would just, the output of Netcat, you don't need to run it for you, but that's the point. It will bring up, remember there was also like health checks and stuff you've seen before, and that's how we try to make sure that one of the other services is up and running before I try and talk to it. You don't need to do that anymore. Dagger just does it, right? I'm going to try and run this and see what happens. This is MySQL booting up. And then, because of that with service binding, the code understands this is a DAG, right? The graph, the acyclic graph thing, because it knows, doesn't matter what that is, it's Netcat. So yeah, it knows, so therefore that's what it'll do for you automatically, basically. The more examples you throw at it, the more you'll see the power coming into play. Like, I need a database, I need a cache, I need that other thing, and I need a queue manager, right? And you'll see the output. I mean, it's pretty cool, right? The shell, the Dagger shell, like the left side. See these wee branches and stuff like that? So it'll all happen in real time, basically. Boom. Let's see. So then, that's just basics. Then I thought, oh my God, what can I build with this, right? So then, okay, who here has a piece of software, PHP project, and you have to test it on multiple PHP versions? Is that a thing? Okay. And it's quite difficult, right? And it's a pain in the ass, well, to be honest. And in GitHub Actions, it calls it a matrix, right? And also Jenkins, that's why it was called that. They call it a matrix. And you want to configure all this stuff, matrix, so that you see it all comes together, do it in parallel, yada, yada. And I'm thinking, well, that's obviously awkward. Why not just write a for loop? And that's effectively, I was able to do that with one line of code, like for each, and then just tell it the version in the loop, and it'll do that one. And you're like, well, that used to be quite a complex, task to set up and make work. I'm like, what else could I do, right? And I'm going to show you something that I made yesterday, just messing around. I guess this is what you would do for your teams or for your future selves in your companies. I wrote a class called the Builder, right? Because like this is the verbose, this is the direct talking to the SDK, right? Like from, with exec, because most of the time it's with exec, right? You're running things, commands, install stuff. But I thought, I may want to abstract that, make it a bit easier so that people aren't having to learn the bare bones of Dagger, although it's still trivial, they still need to know what the different things are. So I basically created a little class called the Builder, so I could build stuff. And I've got 3 methods that I put on that: PHP runtime, apt packages, and extensions. Couldn't do it before, right? Because you were deep in just Docker files and bash land, which is very verbose and mental, right? To be trying to figure out and teach new people as well. Like, if you got a newcomer and a junior developer, and he's like, I know how to code, but I haven't touched CI before. I've not worked in a proper company. Well, you could just show them that, and they get it, and they just use it. So this is an example of a copy. So Dagger, you do host, and then give it directory, and then the path. And then, therefore, on this chain of things, it's with directory. And you just give it the variable of the directory. Because it's not just where the directory, because this method has like include and exclude paths, right? See? So you can do a copy. This is easy. The awkward way to do it, the current way, is there's a Docker ignore file. Who here is familiar with a Docker ignore file? Okay. Because when you do a copy, obviously it's going to copy everything, sometimes like a node modules folder in the repository, and like your machine just like fries, right? Takes off. So you have to find a Docker ignore file, which is a workaround, so that when it does a copy, it excludes certain folders from being in that image. And now it's just an argument to a function, and you just tell it what to exclude. No extra stuff. And so that's why it's a variable, right? Let me show you the class that I made. So that's it. Because I wrote a little map thing, right? Basically, the version on the left, so that when I give the version to the PHP runtime function, you can just type 8.2, right? And you'll get a 8.2 runtime, and then you can do what you want. So it's about reusability. You can have like a base runtime, like all our projects need these extensions and they need things set up this way. Cool. So then maybe you can write a function or a something, and then that's where everything starts. And then it's just a variable. And then you customize. You do add, because you maybe have 4 or 5 projects, so they all share the same stuff. So configured, done once, you can maintain it. And then each of your projects might have different things going on. Maybe different languages. Like, ironically, you're using PHP, but it could be like a front-end project, right, that you're building. So that's JavaScript tech, but it will still be in the same space. So it's the same syntax as you've seen. It's just, I want a container, and then from, and then image. Apt packages. It's just a wrapper around with exec. give me an array of packages that you want. Cool. All right, and I'll do the work. And literally all I'm doing is just taking an array and making it a string, and then it's just apt-get install. So right at the very beginning of the talk, you remember I was showing you the standard Docker file, which has got all these apt-get backticks and all that. You forget a backtick, life's crazy, right? And so I've effectively just stored it here. So now it's not daunting, and you're not just staring at this anymore. So you can replace this with this. And extensions, there's a thingy in the Docker files, and you give it, this is literally the same thing. And so I built this just on the train, on the way here, yesterday, or whatever, the day before. And that's kind of where I've got to so far, in terms of stuff. Is it making sense, I hope? Good, okay. Yeah, okay. So then I thought, well, we could build stuff for ourselves, right, as a community, right? Cool things like, I want a Redis, I want an extension, I want a thing. I don't need to know how to do it. I just say, give it to me. As web developers and like PHP devs, so it should just be like expressive, just like, I want this thing, give it to me, make my life easy, right? So I was thinking, well, in the composer package, the Dagger/Docker composer package, we could put stuff in there for us, buildy things, and maybe that would generate snippets of code for us, like a wizard, right? So it might ask you, it's Symfony, it's the Symfony console, right? Actually, it's here. I'll show you. It's in the vendor folder, ironically. Vendor, Dagger. I'm not going to open the code. I want to show you the folder structure. So there you go. There's the Dagger SDK. And the code gen part is the part where all the automatic generated stuff get built, and the rest of it is just literally Symfony stuff. Here you go, Docker Compose JSON. That was it. GraphQL client, obviously, so it can talk to the Dagger engine. The Dagger engine's running on your machine. It's a container. But you can also, you don't need to put the Dagger engine on your machine. You can have the Dagger engine on a shared machine on the network. And all your machines locally will share the same cache. Because you don't need the Docker. You don't need the containers to be running on your machine. Because it's Dagger that's running it inside of its little magic box. So you can put that anywhere. And so that's fundamentally now you can, like one person can download an image on that machine, and now you all have images. Because, internet, right? Like you're waiting for like a 1 gigabyte Docker file, Docker pull, right? It happens all the time. Or you clear your folders and then you do up in your project, and then you have to wait. Okay, right? So that's also, I've been thinking, like maybe we could have like in your team, you have a shared machine on the cloud somewhere, and that's where Dagger runs, and on your local you just say IP address of the guy. But yeah, this is it, Symfony process, and obviously PHP unit for testing, and Symfony console. And yeah, so there's an idea to share, but it's ours, it's PHP. We don't have to worry about all the other languages and the syntaxes and the YAMLs and all that. We can just come right back to what we have. So I'd like to sort of leave you with some thoughts, some thought-provoking stuff, effectively, like what could we build now for ourselves? Maybe they'll be like, we've got the official Dagger one, like this one, but maybe we can have another library, like Dagger utilities, community utilities. And so we can just have cool stuff. And you don't have to worry about how it's done. You just like, I want a database, I want this. So a new service pops up, right? A new piece of technology. We add it there once, and then you can just, in your code, just go, give me that. Right? That's why I'm buzzing. Obviously, there's a lot that I've learned that I've not shown you, and there's a lot that's just about to be released that I've not got time right now to talk about, but basically watch this space and get involved. They have a Discord channel, and they're active. The team are on it daily. Right? I mean, they're constantly in the community. It's growing and growing, and everybody's helping each other. There's help channels, there's a PHP channel, and there's like general stuff, so also get involved. So if you're stuck and you're trying to use this, you can find me like in normal means like social media, like Twitter and LinkedIn or whatever. But you can also just go on the Discord. You can find me there, and the rest of the Dagger team as well, and they'll just help you with stuff if you get stuck or you get questions. But really, what I'm wondering is like, at this point now, we can wrap up the talk, but what are your questions, curiosities? Because I've got my own questions, and I'm trying to build an understanding so we can then build that stuff for use, right? So let's go back to slides. Let's see. What do I want to show you? Okay, one last thing. Security, right? Credentials, secrets, obviously. So if you want to put a secret into your container, the method is called with secret variable, with environment variable, right? So secret's still there. This is a technique. It's called with new file. It means that it's not going to create the file. This is Golang, but it's going to be the same anyway. You can make a file on the fly, basically, on the fly in the image before it gets, before you go, right, let's tag it, let's push the Docker image up, it's ready to go. So you can bake things in there for certain environments. And therefore, this is an example where op is a secret manager thing, but what it's doing basically is a little bit of nasty bash, but the point is, it's creating a .env file, basically, for production using a secret utility special thing. But it's quite clever, and I've seen that. That's a good technique. I like that one because I do the same, similar. I showed you something at the beginning, like sed, like replace an env file and right. But yeah, 4-man or something like that. Nonetheless, they created a custom entry point, so when it boots, it gets the secrets, and then it goes and generates it because it's a secret manager, right? So Vault by HashiCorp, that's a secret manager, right? So the secrets are not in your GitHub Actions, variables. They're in a special Vault thing, right, on the cloud where secrets live. So that's an example of how you do it right so the credentials don't live anywhere else apart from when it runs, because this is an entry point. At the bottom it says with entry point. So that's the method. So it sets the entry point. And yeah, anyway, obviously. We've got time for questions and stuff, but that's me. I'm done. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Have we got any questions from the audience? Okay, let's start with the easy front.
Well, thanks, Paul, for the talk. It was great. And the question is, how do you test whatever you're trying to build? Because you created a builder, right? And how do you test that? Like, how would it be the process?
You mean like automation testing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would write a unit test against your builder class. So effectively, we can test our tests a little bit, but where is the bug in my CI pipeline? That mystery, that journey we all go down. Well, if you write tests against the things, it will tell you. You don't have to go and figure it out. The machine will do the work.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for making us aware of this. My question would be, if I understood this correctly, the GraphQL API runs as on what would be the test runner, I guess, and the Dagger CLI communicates with it, or what's the relationship of the GraphQL API thing with the CLI?
So the CLI, which is Dagger, right? Dagger run, that's just a command line utility. The work isn't there. It's, it's inside the Dagger engine that's running on your machine. That's a container. So if you pop open that container, then it's got this Dagger stuff inside, and it's got its GraphQL API. You don't have to talk to that, and that's why the SDKs are here, and all the languages. Because you can send like a GraphQL payload, a string, to an API, and it will do the work. So effectively, the SDKs are just now easy. They're just query builders. They just build GraphQL queries under the hood. Every time you add a method and do stuff, and then when it goes run, then it will send it up. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
I think it was more in the direction of, for example, we now use Azure pipelines.
Right.
And we have the YAML files you talked about. So if I write this now and commit it to Azure and run a new pipeline, where does it actually run? So where does it talk to? Where is the actual container?
Good question. I guess the answer is there's options. You can have a Dagger engine that's running on somebody else, or you can just you would install Dagger. Line number 1 of your Azure pipeline See that one-liner of the bash, like the curl command to get the dagger and to install it? That's it.
All right.
Line
okay.
1, dagger. Line 2, run dagger.
All right.
And,
that
and,
answers
you're
it.
out, and that's it. You're out of there.
All right. Thank you.
You have a couple more?
Great talk, thank you. My question is, in your PHP code, there was Dagger Connect. So as you said, it's the server is running on your machine, it's connecting
Yep.
locally. Does that mean it can also connect remote servers?
Yes.
Cool.
So, yep, there you go. Yeah.
Sorry, another question. I'm curious on the composer JSON file. You required one GraphQL client, or I think this is Dagger's file, right?
No, it's a public GraphQL client.
So there's one required, and also required dev. There's another package. I was just curious why.
The guy, his name is Zero, well, his alias is Zero, who I've been talking to a lot, all the time, last few days. He did that. I don't know why he did it. I haven't asked him yet. I also looked at it and went, why do you have 2 GraphQL? So yeah, the answer is I don't know. But if you want to join Discord and go on the PHP channel, you can ask, and he will be able to tell you.
So I guess this runs Docker in Docker?
Hi. Good question. I was on a call with the Dagger team a few days ago, and I asked them the same question. The answer is no. You could do that. Yes, you could do it, right? So you could put, and run Docker commands in your pipeline. Cool. Yeah, it will work. But it doesn't do Docker on Docker. It's smarter than that. It's because the Dagger has elevated privileges, right? To be like super user on your machine, because that's you're allowed to do that. And so therefore, it uses your host.
It connects to the socket outside of it.
Yeah, because the Docker engine is part of this, so that's a socket, and the Dagger engine is a socket. So your CLI talks to the socket, and then that talks to Docker. The underlying engine of Docker, which is BuildKit and all the other runtimes, so that magic. So effectively, there isn't a Docker. It's the engine that came out of Docker existing is in there, or it's on your machine, right, installed. So that, I think, maybe that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Still got more. Okay.
Up the back.
If I wanted the Dagger to trigger through GitHub, how would I do that? So would I have a GitHub action, or does Dagger Cloud connect to GitHub to trigger? So if I was to trigger a Git push,
I know what you mean.
I wanted to automate that.
Sure. So line 1 of your GitHub Actions file would just be install Dagger and then run Dagger. So that's the invocation.
Okay.
And so when you push to your repo, GitHub will trigger the workflow, and then that workflow, it's just Dagger run my file.php, my pipeline.php, and then it works. Did that answer your question?
It did, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for this. This looks very exciting. My question is, once you create that, essentially, we'll call it a Docker file, and you have that built image, is the plan that you then you push that image to production?
Yes.
Excellent. So,
and there's a function for that. It's called publish. So you would do publish, and you're done. And it goes to the Docker registry, right, where the images live. So you can have your own private registries. You can use the Docker Hub. It's all there. And they did that for me actually. So yeah, publish, and then the thing, options. Check it out. There's a lot of examples already on the internet. And I can show you them on the Discord. I'll send you the URLs to all these other repos that the Dagger team and all the companies are. Because Dagger actually was created, I think, 2021. So it's not new. But it's taken this time to mature to get to this stage where it's now going, and that's how I ended up finding it. So all these things, you're scenarios, what about that, what about that? I won't know that because I'm still fresh to it, but you can find it on the web. It's all over GitHub, all these different companies, right? They're like, how do you do that? Oh, it'll come up, right? So what I do basically is I go, is there a way to do this? And the Dagger team go, yep. And they send me to like a Golang repo or a, you know, whatever. And I'm like, see all this cool stuff that they've been doing for years now. I'm like, awesome. ChatGPT, written in PHP.
That's great, thanks.
Awesome.
Any more questions? I can't see where you're pointing.
Front. I can barely see as well. Same question as before. How do you push your images?
Well, you've obviously been very thorough. Well done.
Cool.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.